To begin this next iteration, I'm going to drag out a copy of the second iteration in the object's context and then rename this geometry node to third iteration. As before, when diving in, I want to recolor all my network boxes from my previous solution to gray to show me that these are solutions from an old iteration. New solutions will have new network boxes in a color to show me what has been learned in this iteration. Since I want to extend the length of the top groom, I'm going to disable the guide process node to shut off the lift and the set length. This will return the hair to a slicked back version as we saw before. Now dragging out a wire from the hair clump's guide output, I'm going to add a resample node. The resample node does not need max seg length, nor does it need max segs, but instead I definitely want the curve view attribute to come out from this node. Using the curve view attribute, I can now use a group expression node to type in a series of code to find only the tips in which I can copy to points later. The vexpression should be attribute curve u equals 1. The group name is tips to find later, and setting the group type to points, I can now see this group. The extension of hair that I want to see should be a bit of a swoop that'll create a bun. To do this, I'm going to use again a Bezier curve, and dragging out some points, I can adjust the handles to become smooth by clicking the Make Balanced option or typing 3. And then with a bit of artistic direction, change this curve to look a little bit like an S. Now there's still some points here that are closer to the scalp region. These are very, very short hairs that were grown in the groom. I'm going to remove those using a labs delete small parts and change the mode from area to perimeter. Now with the threshold, if I dial it in by adding a 0 and going into the information and turning on the point group and looking at tips, I can see that all of those points near the scalp have disappeared. As before, the Bezier curve that I've created needs to be snapped to the origin, though I've drawn it in free space where I believe it should look good by the hair groom. To snap it to the origin, I'm going to just drag out a copy of my step 5 curve placement, which will take the Bezier, convert it, and then I have a resample for the curve resolution. And then it will add the attribute and stash the X form in which that can be attribute copied into all points and then brought to the origin. Taking the output of this step 5 curves placement and putting into the first input of copy to points, and then the second input of copy to points being the labs delete small parts, I can now see when using the target points as the tips group, all of these curves repeatedly placed where every hair would have ended. The groom should express a little bit of a shape instead of being layered curves that are directly placed in a stack. To get more width, I'm going to add a orient along curve node. And now to see it with the groom coming out of the scalp, I'm going to take a merge node at the bottom of the copy to points and also wire in the orient along curve. I can see that for the settings I have currently, the bun does not look like it is in the proper orientation. To begin correcting this, I want to change my target up vector to Z-axis. I can then enable the additional rotations and adding roll and twist and pitch I can slowly rotate the bun until every curve seems to land in place from where it should continue from off the groom. A pitch of 210 and a roll of 180 degrees is working just fine for this. I don't want the bun to spread out too wide, as I have intentions later to add some extra effect to this. I want the hairs to be fairly tight. And as before, in the second iteration, I can always go back to my first curve that was placed and continue to draw and watch the bun redesign itself accordingly. After the merge node, I need a fuse node. The snap distance is too large, so I'm going to put 4 zeros after the decimal and then a 1. If I look down at my geometry information in the bottom right corner of the viewport, I can see those points being reduced. Should be by the number of primitives available. And now I'm going to add a join node at the end of the fuse. If I don't see the primitive number drop to exactly half, the join node is not working. This is because the merge node needs to have the inputs in the proper order, as there are different attributes being piped in from the two inputs of copy to points and orient along curves. Simply by switching the order in the merge node, this can correct the problem. And now I can see that my primitives is reduced in half. Now I want to take a quick look at the skin prim attribute to see if there are any primitives that did not receive a skin prim now that the two curves have been joined along the copy to points. To do this, I will jump out of the scene view and go to the geometry spreadsheet. Sure enough, there are two primitives at the very end. For my own peace of mind, I'm going to blast those primitives off the groom as they are not considered as hair guides. Typing out their individual number in the group for blast, I could see the exact primitives that did not come along with the join. This is with delete non-selected to make them visible. Now toggling delete non-selected off, those two curves will disappear. This is a new solution, so I want to drag out a network box and give it a name. It will be Step 7 Curve to Guide Joining. I have quite a bit of solutions now on iteration 3, so I think it's time to clean up some of the node tree that we have. To do this, I'm going to start adding null nodes at the end of every solution. I want to rename each one of these nulls as out, and then the name of what is being coming into that null. So if it's the fade or the top hair or the bun, I have a null for each one of these. After I have these nulls placed, I'm going to create an object merge to match each one of these nulls. And the name will be appropriate, saying in, and then in fade, in top hair, etc. I also need the face as well, so I'll make a null called out head. And then disconnecting the previous merge solution at the end of the node tree, I can now create all those object merges, dragging in the name of that null into the object1 parameter to reference it, and then merge them all together for visibility at a single area of this node graph, which will be my geometry control center. All of the object merges that have hair, I'm going to put into the first merge as they get a color. And then the objects that do not have hair, such as the head and any other accessories I create later, will go into the very final merge. A network box around this geometry control area will be given a name called Step 8, Geometry Handling. With this new bun in place, I'm going to use a brand new node for Houdini 21 called Guide Volume. If I adjust the parameters from shell surface to cross sections, I can visualize all the cross sections of the Groom and then isolate a single shape in order to use as a tracing region to create a hair elastic. Using a blast and delete non-selected, I can use the increment ladder to drag through the different primitives until I find a shape that looks like the region of where the bun is being pinned in with the rest of the Groom. With the current settings, I think primitive number 15 should work just fine. To create my hair elastic, I'm going to use the Lab Simple Rope Wrap and connecting the first two inputs with the output of the blast. It immediately works. All I need to do is change the diameter of this rope by adding one more 0 after the decimal, and additionally the resolution one more 0 after the decimal to 0.005. Now I can take my time to dial in the diameter to something more suitable, depending on what kind of material the elastic would be made from. And now the degree twist per unit. As this is a very, very small rope that's being made, I need to drag up into the thousands in order to see some twisting. I like this final look. This deserves another null with an object merge to go with it, in which I'll call it out elastic. I notice that the hair elastic is penetrating into the scalp. To adjust the size of this, I want to add a transform node right before the null out elastic. I first need to click Move Pivot to Centroid so that when I scale, the elastic doesn't zoom towards the origin. Now it doesn't nearly penetrate the head as much. There might be some penetration of hairs, but this is not noticeable. And there we have it. With a new output node, I have a third iteration in which shows the hair swooping back and tying back into a bun. This is a great solution as a variety of patterns can be drawn out, and I can always now artistically design how the end of the hair should look in what direction I want it to change. Creating a final network box around the hair elastic portion, I'm going to label it Step 9 Hair Elastic, and this completes the third iteration. Thanks for watching.